Hi, I'm Greg Gorbach with ARC, and today I'm talking with Tom Kurtz. Tom's the Global Solution Lead with Asset and Services Management for SAP. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much, Greg. Good to be with you again.
Yeah, good to see you. So we know there's been a lot of disruption in the world recently. Given that, what's it take to build a resilient global supply chain?
Excellent question. I think it's a question a lot of people here this week and in general in the world of supply chain are trying to figure out. I think from my perspective, we at SAP, we like to talk about it in a few different ways. So the first off is think about how companies are managing their processes today. Are they doing that in a siloed fashion? Really, it comes down to rethinking how they do that. So they have to stop doing it from a siloed fashion. Second piece is if from a data perspective, and a decision-making perspective, are companies making those decisions from a data-driven perspective? And finally, the environment continues to change. There continues to be a lot of different players in your overall ecosystem. So when you look at those three pieces, what we encourage companies to do to be risk resilient is we call them the 3 C's: connect, contextualize, and collaborate. So you need to connect every process. You don't want to be siloed. You want to connect your business processes together. You want to contextualize your decisions with centralized data, with normalized data and harmonized data that we talked about. And finally, you want to collaborate across your ecosystem. If you're a manufacturer, you want to be able to collaborate with your operators, with your service providers, and vice versa. So connect every process, contextualize your decisions, and collaborate with your ecosystem.
Okay, I get it. So connect, contextualize, and collaborate. Can you relate that to the asset and services part of the business?
Absolutely, that's my world. And so SAP looks at that at a broader supply chain base, but I care about it near and dear from an asset and service management perspective. So if I look at connecting every process to start, connecting every process for me in the world of asset and service management, that starts with what we call closed loop integration between asset strategy and maintenance execution. So a lot of companies today are managing their assets, they're maintaining their assets, and they want to move that upstream. They want to be able to do risk and criticality assessments. They want those risk and criticality assessments to result in recommendations. They want those recommendations to be able to be fed down further into their maintenance system. So really bringing all those processes together, connecting those processes is a very important part of the equation for those customers. So we want to help companies bring those together. The second piece is around mobility in terms of connecting process. So everything I just talked about, especially when it comes to the asset side of it, to the execution side of it, companies want to be able to do that mobily. They want to be able to have that persona-based. They want to be able to have their technicians in the field using it. So they want to connect those processes with their technicians in the field using something like SAP Service and Asset Manager.
Okay, so and then the next piece, again, for services and assets, contextualize.
Yes, contextualizing your decisions. So that I would talk about in the context of continuing with this theme of risk and criticality and so forth, but really the concept of being able to generate those recommendations and having those recommendations feed into your maintenance systems. A lot of companies today have static maintenance plans. They do it one way for all their assets, or they do it X number of ways for a certain number of assets. If they can contextualize that and take the recommendations and be able to segment those assets better through SAP Asset Performance Management, that gives them an opportunity to do that. Keeping with APM, Asset Performance Management, being able to mesh IT and OT data together. You hear a lot of companies this week, I've heard a lot, there's a lot of the sessions this week about the convergence of IT and OT and even ET, engineering technology.
Sure.
And so you hear a lot about that and being able to, for us, what that means is you take that operational data, that engineering data, and if you're able to mesh it with your enterprise business data, that provides the context that you don't get if you're just looking at the raw OT data. And finally, continuing with the insights theme, the concept of analytics, being able to run analysis against all of that data, the meshed data, the converged data, and give you even further insights that allows you to contextualize and make data-driven decisions.
Okay, great. So I imagine that collaboration across the ecosystem is a hugely important part of this.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely. So that's the third, collaborate across the ecosystem. And for this, SAP on a broader level, you'll hear us talk about SAP business networks. Those business networks can be for logistics, they could be for procurement, and in the case of today, our conversation, it could be for asset management. And companies are using that in a couple ways today. So they want to be able to manage asset data effectively between the different stakeholders in the ecosystem. So again, in the world of asset and service, that could be manufacturers, that could be operators of the equipment, service providers of the equipment. It could be a manufacturer who's acting as a service provider. And the ability to have centralized asset equipment information about, say, a commissioned asset that's once it's installed, being able to be registered on a central network that all those parties can have access to, be able to collaborate and message back and forth about that, being able to increase the knowledge of each other's situation and be able to, if you're a service provider, increase your service levels as a result. So really having that centralized asset data is important from a collaboration standpoint. The second area that we're starting to see a lot more of is the ability to do collaborative work orders. So if you think about the scenario, you're an operator and you're working with a third-party service provider, if you open a work order that you want to be able to share with an external party, with a third party, being able to work on that work order collaborative fashion that way is also very important to a lot of the stakeholders out there. So those are a couple examples of how I would look at collaborating across your ecosystem.
Okay, great. So can you just drill in a bit for me on the service providers? What do they need to be successful?
Sure. So that's a great point. Service management is a topic that continues to really be big for SAP, and we see it as a really big market opportunity for the existing service providers and those manufacturers who are looking to get to really more into the service side of things. So we look at it in three main categories of an end-to-end flow. So you have your customer service. How do I really ensure a strong customer experience, an omni-channel experience for my customers up front? That moves into service operations as a second piece. So if a customer wants to open a service order, how do I process that service order? How do I manage the assignment and the optimization of those service orders? And then on the back end, the invoicing side of that. And then finally, the last piece around field service. So how do I schedule and dispatch technicians accordingly? So that kind of end to end, from customer service to service operations to field service, allows companies to be even more effective in their service management through reinventing business models, through delivering service precision, and finally through revolutionizing the equipment performance of the equipment that they're managing.
Okay, great. And then just to wrap up, can you talk a little bit about sustainability? It's a hot topic today.
Yeah, it is really.
Yeah.
No, I would love to, and I think sustainability. I'll answer it in two ways. I think sustainability from the perspective of what we've been talking about, asset and service. I think it's always important that everything we've talked about, in terms of optimizing the equipment, in terms of managing effectively the data and the information that you are able to contextualize, those all have significant sustainability byproducts. So if you're able to revolutionize your equipment performance, the net result of that is a longer lifespan for the equipment. So your equipment in existence lasts longer. As it lasts longer, it's optimizing energy better. It's better optimized, so it's more efficiently using that energy. As you're managing and dispatching your technicians, if you're able to use technologies like artificial intelligence to be able to do route optimization more effectively, you're going to reduce emissions of those technicians out in the field. So those are some examples, some real case studies. We actually have a dental equipment company that we work with, and they have actually come back and said, through using your field service management system, we're able to reduce our mileage in our routes, which of course has a cost benefit, but it also has a sustainability reduced emissions benefit. So that's from an asset and service. And then finally, there's a few products that are interesting from our portfolio, namely responsible design and production. So on the engineering side, how do we better design products and produce them to be more sustainable and enter it into the circular economy more effectively? And secondly, product footprint management. How do we really understand the footprint that a product brings to the environment and what are the implications of that from an ESG perspective.
Okay, terrific. Well, thanks a lot, Tom. Really
My
good
pleasure.
conversation today.
Thank you.
I've been talking to Tom Kurtz with SAP. Thanks for joining us.